Today we're going to be making numbers 6 and 9 in the treat box series. I'm going to make each of the boxes the same size overall, so you can use one or more numbers in conjunction with one another. And in addition, I try to use 1/8 of an inch rather than 1/16, so you can easily scale up or down the size of the boxes. For each box, we start by making a template, which you will then draw around on your base cardstock to create your front and back panels. And on all boxes, the starting cardstock is 4.5 inches by 7.5 inches. The front and back panels for the 6 and the 9 will be exactly the same. However, the openings on the box are in different places, and therefore I will give you 2 sets of lengths for the side strips, so you can then use whichever set is applicable for either the 6 or the 9 that you need. Along the 4.5 inch side, score or mark with your pencil from top to bottom at 1.5 inches and 3 inches. Along the long side, mark from top to bottom or score at 5/8 of an inch, 1.5 inches, 3 inches, 3 7/8 of an inch, 4.5 inches, 5.25 inches, 6 inches, and 6 7/8 of an inch. Once your lines are marked up, follow the red lines as per the template here to create what will either be your number 6 or your number 9. You will then cut out your shape, remove the middle section here, cut around the edge, and then use this as a template to draw around on your base cardstock to create your front and back panels. We'll now make the side panels to join the front and back together. We'll start with the number 6, and on this template you can see that I've marked the length of each of the side sections. You'll be familiar with this process if you've made any of the other number boxes. The construction is exactly the same on all of the boxes. I would recommend that you measure the length of each of your sides on your template to make sure that they're the same length as mine. If not, you will need to adjust the lengths of your strips and the position of your score lines accordingly. The opening of this particular box is here, but as I've said in previous boxes, you can put the opening anywhere you so choose. You just need to amend the length of the strips accordingly. And you don't need to create your strips as long strips as I'm going to do. You could, for instance, make each length a strip in its own right, and all you need to remember is, for instance, this long strip is 6.25 inches. Add on 1/2 inch or an element for a glue tab so that you can then stick the next strip on and work your way around the box that way. This is quite a good way of using up scraps of cardstock. The depth of your box can be whichever depth you choose. I have made boxes which are both 1 inch and 2 inch in depth. Decide on the depth of the box you want and then add on an inch to the measurement. For instance, I'm going to be making boxes which are 1 inch in depth. Each strip is therefore going to be 2 inches wide, scored at 1/2 and 1.5. So that is going to give me a 1/2 inch glue tab on the left, the width of my box, and then a 1/2 inch glue tab on the right. So you can change up the depth of your boxes as you so choose. These are the lengths of the strips that we're going to cut. As I've said, mine are all going to be 2 inches wide. If you have made any of the other boxes, you may want to just take a note of the length of the strips and then continue with the process accordingly. Strip A is going to run down this left-hand side and along the bottom with a glue tab here. This is going to be 10 1/8 of an inch, scored at 6.25, 8 1/4, and 9 5/8. Strip B is going to run around this right hand section here. This is 8 3/8 of an inch long, scored at 1 5/8, 4 3/4, 6 3/8, and 7 7/8. Strip C is going to be this section here, up and with a glue tab. This is 7 3/8 of an inch long, scored at 1 1/2, 3, 3 3/4, 5 1/4, and 6 7/8. Strip D is going to run along the top and will incorporate the opening in this section here. That is 5 1/4 inches long, scored at 1 5/8, 3 1/8, and 4 3/4. And then finally, strip E is going to run in this internal section. That is 6 1/2 inches long, scored at 1 1/2, 3, 4 1/2, and 6. I'll just leave those on the screen for a moment. I'll give you the measurements for the 9 if that's what you're going to be making. So again, the measurements along the side of the box is going to be exactly the same. The strip pieces will be different, and the opening on this box is at the top here. So for the number 9, strip A is going to run around this section down and up into here, and then a glue tab here. That's 10 1/2 inches long, scored at 3 1/8, 4 3/4, 6 1/4, 7 3/4, 9 1/4, and 10. Strip B is going to run around this bottom section up into here with a glue tab. That is 8 5/8 of an inch long, scored at 1 1/2, 3 1/8, 4 3/4, 6 1/4, and 8 1/8. Strip C is just going to run along this side section. That is 6 3/4 inches long, scored at 6 1/4. Strip D runs along the top and incorporates the opening. That is 5 1/4 inches long, scored at 1 5/8, 3 1/8, and 4 3/4. And then finally, strip E is in this middle section here, 6 1/2 inches long, scored at 1 1/2, 3, 4 1/2, and 6. We can now work on our strips, and on all of our strips we can start by folding and burnishing along the long side glue tabs. I'm going to be working on the number 6, but the process is going to be the same whether you're working on the 6 or the 9. We're now going to fold and burnish the vertical score lines here. What you may want to do is fold and burnish your strips into the orientation that they're going to sit in as they move around the box. So for instance, each of these would be mountain folds. So that section is going to sit around there, like so. So that will sit round like so. So as you're folding and burnishing each of your strips, just manipulate them into the shape that they're going to sit in on the outside or the internal section of the box. We're now going to cut our strips. So we'll start with strip A, and we can cut up each of the score lines within the 1/2 inch section. So we're effectively splitting each of the sections through the 1/2 inch glue tab. I've got the 1/2 inch tab in front of me. I'm going to remove the bottom left and right hand squares, and then take a wedge from the end So this is where we will add our strips together as we start to add this onto the back or the front panel. And my personal preference is to use my circle punch and just add a small finger notch into the top like so. So that's strip A. We will do exactly the same with strips B, C and E. These won't have finger notches, obviously. And the only difference is on strip D, which is going to be the strip for the opening. I'm going to cut up the 1/2 inch tab and separate the sections as we did previously. I am going to remove the bottom square. However, rather than taking a wedge from this tab, I'm going to use my corner rounder just to shape that. This is the tab which is going to sit on the inside of the box. So this is effectively the lid element of the box. Once your strips are prepared, it's just a case of taking your strips in order, adding glue to the side tabs and adhering them around the outer edge of the box to create the side panel of the box. So this one will fit in here. So take your time. Hopefully you should find that your strips and your templates line up. I'd like to, just as I've done on all the other boxes, point out this is a hand cut box. There is always room for an element of error. Bear that in mind. It has not been cut with an electronic die cutting machine. When you get to the end of strip A, obviously join on strip B, and then you can continue your way around. When you get to the closure section, so this is going to sit in this orientation. This is my notch here. Make sure that you keep this piece completely out of the way and you're only adding glue onto these two tabs here. So I'm going to join the strip on to start with and then add your glue onto the two tabs only, not the end tab, otherwise your opening will not open. And manipulate those pieces into place. So once the strips are all in place, I'm going to fold in the tabs and just use a dot of glue, and where any tab overlaps with another tab, I'm just going to secure them. It will just add a little bit of rigidity and help the box maintain its shape as you go to put the second panel on. Don't forget to add in strip E, and then once I'm happy that that's all secure, I can use my construction glue, add my construction glue onto the long tabs all the way around. Don't add it to the opening, keep that ball out of the way. Don't forget to add it to the internal section, and then I can take my second panel and add that onto the top. Once you've got the box put together, check the opening and just see whether you need to cut anything off the front tab of the opening section. I'm just going to take a tiny amount off the front of there just to make this a little bit easier to get in. I'll give you the measurements for the matte layer, and again I would recommend you cut this out of scrap first, just to make sure you get the look you like of the matte layer, particularly when we're working around these angles at the top and the angles at the bottom. My starting cardstock was 4 1/4 by 7 1/4 inches, and I've marked from top to bottom at 1 1/4, 1 3/8, 2 7/8, and 3. Along the long side, I've marked at 1/2 inch plus a 1/16, 1 1/4, 3, 3 1/2, 4 1/8, 5 1/4, 6, and 6 5/8 plus a 16th. I've then gone around the template. So the things to bear in mind is these two lines which are close to each other, 1 1/4, 1 3/8, 2 7/8 and 3/8. The two outer lines are in relation to the internal and this section on the box and this section on the box. The internal lines, so the ones at 1 3/8 and 2 7/8, these are the lines to create the angles at the top. So they are very close together, but they're not in the same place, as it were. So just bear that in mind. So if you follow the template, follow the red lines on the template here, you should get 1/8 of an inch border all the way around there or thereabouts. But as I say, please do cut this out of scrap cardstock and just check it and then make any adjustments accordingly, because these matte layers have become a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. So this one, just to repeat, opens at the top here. And if this was the number 9, this would be opening at the top here. So this is one of the previous boxes, the number 1. You can see the boxes are the same height and the same width. These two happen to be the same depth, and you can just see how the boxes would work in conjunction with one another if you needed them to. So that's another box ticked off in the number box series. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel, and until next time, thanks for watching.